Welcome to the Game Week review, and it is Game Week 34 that we're going to be reviewing this game week. I'm delighted to be joined by Sam Collyer. Sam, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, mate. Always a pleasure to be on once again. You know, it's becoming a bit more frequent now. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, we've mentioned, haven't we, about kind of getting you on the podcast more, and I think this is a good way of doing it. Of course, I've always wanted to review all the fixtures, and this is kind of a new concept that hopefully we'll be able to do more often in the future, and it's certainly a good game week to be reviewing. Before we do get into all the games, please remember to check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. There'll be a link in the description for you to do that. You get 50% off your card machine, no contracts or monthly fees. Also, please remember to like and subscribe. It does go a long way. So yeah, jumping straight into it, I think the first game that we should really be looking to review this game week, and I think it is actually Aldershot 3, Hartlepool 2. A damaging result for Hartlepool's chances of making the playoffs this season, but a huge win for Aldershot, of course, winning in the dying seconds.
Yeah, it's two teams that have been in pretty poor form recently. You know, there's been some questions around, you know, the people higher up in the clubs and, you know, so the management. But it's a massive 3 points for Aldershot and you know, a step towards safety for them. You know, I look at that Aldershot side and I do think they should have enough quality to stay up, but they really are, you know, they're flirting with the bottom four at the moment. But, you know, it's a step closer for them, and, you know, they'll look at that, you know, snatch it in the dying moments, but, you know, it's 3 points closer to safety. On Hartlepool a little bit though, you know, they're struggling to really get going now. Limbrick's taking control. I do look at that side that Hartlepool have, and I do think that Limbrick, the way that I've seen Limbrick play in the past, whether he played it for when he was at Woking or when he played it when he was in Wales. He likes to play a possession style game. He likes to have technical players dominating the tempo, controlling the tempo. You know, he needs a ball player, a distributor in midfield. I look at the Hartlepool team that he's inherited, and I don't think it's the kind of team that can suit that style of football. So I think they could be a side that struggle for the remainder of the season. But, you know, you look at the players they put out, like Jack Hunter, Nathan Sherron. You know, these kind of midfielders, they're not the technical, you know, ball players that Limbrick needs to, you know, play his effective system. He needs these are the kind of like gritty, like ball winners that, you know, Saul wanted in his team. So it could be a bit of a tough, it could be a rocky end to the season for Hartlepool, I think. But, you know, I've seen Limbrick what he can do in the past, and if he can inherit a team, and, you know, if he does get the summer to, you know, build on what he has, I can see him, you know, turning it around for Hartlepool.
7 points behind the playoffs, Hartlepool are now, and of course, sitting in seventh place is Altrincham. Altrincham, I should say, I've actually got 2 games in hand as well on Hartlepool, so that could be extended to up to 13 points. For me, the chances of Hartlepool reaching the playoffs this season are now slim, and I think it is a disappointing season if Hartlepool don't make the playoffs, because I look at the individuals, you know, within that side, Disaruwe, Gary Medine, even the likes of Mancini, Gray as well, another player, and even defensively as well, that they've got some quality players in there, a lot of experience in that side, but just seems to be such an unsettled season. They've gone through, I believe, 3 managers now, including Lenny Lawrence. I know he was already working behind the scenes, but I think the fact that Daryl Sall didn't work out, I think, has been a huge reason why they've not really achieved what they set out. Well, aren't looking to achieve what they set out to achieve this season. You know, he inherited a lot of his own players that suit his system, and it clearly just didn't work out there. I was actually surprised they didn't give Lenny Lawrence the job until the end of the season. I thought that was the initial plan, and they were well on track to, you know, really putting a case together to finish inside the playoffs. They made the home stadium a really hard place for sides to go, and, you know, they've brought in Limbrick, and now, of course, defeat to Altrincham, defeat against Aldershot, who were struggling. They haven't won in 4 now. It's disappointing for Hartlepool, and of course, they've got York City next weekend as well, which isn't going to be any easier. As for Aldershot, these are the type of games that you need to be winning. It was an end-to-end game. I think the fact that they've managed to put 3 past Hartlepool says a lot as well for me. The fact that they've still got this ability to be able to score goals, and of course, Barrett scoring the winner late on, that is a huge 3 points for Aldershot to kind of keep them out of the drop zone for another game week.
Yeah, it is worrying partly, Paul, because one of the main bonuses or positives they had was they were a very well structured defensive side. Since Limbrick's come in, they do seem to be leaking a few goals, and also seem to be a little bit blunt up front. One thing that does intrigue me a little bit about this Hartlepool team is that they were screaming out for a long time this season for some pace and directness on the wing. You go and sign Sam Collyer and Reyes Cleary, two very good additions, but he's gone and signed them two, and then he's gone away from playing wingers, and now he's playing Florian up front, and he's playing Cleary as a wing back, and you've suddenly gone and added two really strong assets to your team that you're now not going to get the best out of because they're not being utilised properly. As for Aldershot, like as I mentioned before, the quality in their side, I think they've got them players in their team that can get them out of trouble, and I think Josh Barrett's a huge example of that. 94th minute winner, got the assist for the equaliser as well. He's a real talent, very technically gifted footballer, and he's proven once again why he's such an important player for them. They now sit just outside the relegation zone, Aldershot, and that's a positive sign for them. But like you mentioned with Hartlepool, now 7 points off of that top 7. I think that puts them in, or is it, 7 points or 8? I think it might be actually. But either way, I think it's probably not now. They're probably not quite looking at not looking at that top 7 now, and they're probably just trying to take each week as it goes. Like you said, they did put quite a good run together where you thought maybe they could kick on and maybe reach that top 7 if they were to find that consistency till the end of the season. But yeah, now I think it's a matter of maybe letting Limbrick take a look at the squad, play the system he wants to play, maybe identify the players he wants to keep, and then rebuild in the summer, which can be a bit frustrating because you don't really want to see your team calling the season off with 10, 12 games to go and already thinking about next season. Can be a bit of a punch to the gut, but I think that's what Hartlepool have to do now, because I think there needs to be some change with that squad, and I think there needs to be some change in a fair few areas if they really want to try and go and compete next season.
What concerns me a little bit about Hartlepool long term as well, if you look at that squad, a lot of the players will be on, I think, quite high wage. You think of some of those players, those experienced players, Disaruwe, I'd expect him to be on quite a high wage. You've got Gary Medine as well, Luke Waterfall as well. I think all these players are going to be on quite high wages. And I think overall, you look at those players and they came into Hartlepool with the expectation of we're going to try and get out of this division this season. And it's just not been the case at all for them. When it comes to the end of the season, Hartlepool, it's going to be very hard to get all these players out of the squad. I'm not saying necessarily what they want to do that, but if they're sticking with the manager long term, if he's liking to play possession-based football, these players, aging players, are just not going to suit that style. And to be able to ship them out of the door, you're going to need a complete restructure in the summer. And I think that's going to be really difficult for Hartlepool, particularly as well to bring in new players as well. Because I don't think Hartlepool necessarily have a huge budget in this division. And I think they've spent a lot of money this season on the likes of wages to bring in the likes of Luke Waterfall, of course, Disaruwe signed the previous year. But yeah, I just feel for Hartlepool, it is an underachievement this season for me if they don't make the playoffs, and that's looking very slim now. Out of both clubs, just finally before we move on, who do you say is underachieved more, Hartlepool or Aldershot?
That's a really tricky question, actually, because Aldershot set a high expectation this summer, based off of last season, really. Maybe, internally, Aldershot fans are probably looking at it and thinking there will be a drop-off this season. But, having missed out on the playoffs by just a few points last season, it's kind of, from an outside perspective, you're kind of looking at that and thinking, well, maybe they need to build on that this summer and kind of kick on. But, it's very much gone the opposite direction. Whereas Hartlepool kind of they're kind of sitting around where they were last season a little bit. It's really hard to answer that, actually, because I think they do have two very different goals in mind. But I think I probably have to go Hartlepool, because I think at the end of the day, when it comes with Aldershot, if they stay up, I think that is, that's no different to finishing in that mid-table position where they probably would have wanted to finish. Whereas if Hartlepool miss out on that top 7, that could be the difference between going up and not. I do think, like you said, they've spent quite a lot of money. Even looking at pre-season, like the likes of Adam Campbell coming in, Greg Sloggett, these players have come from high-end League 2, League 1 teams, and they come with a high reputation. It's not quite worked out. So I think I'd go with Hartlepool. I think they probably had higher expectations, but I think they definitely haven't met them. Whereas Aldershot are probably still capable of meeting the expectations they would maybe have liked to meet.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think as well with Aldershot, I am a little surprised to see them as low down as they are. I didn't expect them to be flirting with relegation, but it's not as much of a surprise because, like you've mentioned, I think losing Tollard, Stokes in the summer, they're huge losses, and they just simply haven't been able to replace them, which is always going to be a difficult ask. And if you're trying to play that same system, you're going to have quite a drop off if you're losing those players. But yeah, I think for Hartlepool, I had quite high expectations for them. I actually thought they'd finish inside the playoffs, and recently I've kind of been hanging on to that, thinking that, no, they'll still come good, Hartlepool. They'll still keep this momentum up and climb into the playoffs eventually. And, they've took a turn for the worst and slipped further down the table. And, Sutton and even Solihull, to be fair, have games in hands on them. And if Hartlepool, and if those sides win those, then they're going to go above Hartlepool. Hartlepool could be down to 14th, which would be a very, very poor season. I think that would actually be lower than where Hartlepool finished last season. I think this season's squad on paper was a lot stronger than that. So yeah, I'm very disappointed with Hartlepool. Moving on to the next game now, we have got a bit of a shock here. Altrincham 1, AFC Fylde 2. Only AFC Fylde's third win away from home this season. Altrincham in brilliant form prior to this match, but a bit of a smash and grab from Fylde, would you say? Or
yeah, I mean, it's certainly not the result most people have expected. They have just, they've relieved. I forgot his name. I can't remember the man. Oh, Kevin Phillips. Yeah. They've relieved Kevin Phillips of his managerial role. Wouldn't call it new manager bounce because they haven't got a new manager in, but they've let go of him, picked up 3 points, which is massive for them. It's similar to Aldershot. It's another side that are down there who probably have more quality than what their league position suggests. Nick Halton with another goal, Gavin Massey with a goal and an assist. These are experienced players who have spent time in the EFL in their careers, who are more than capable of playing, at a mid-table, high-end level in the National League. But I think it is more shocking based just purely on the opposition. Altrincham have looked absolutely unstoppable at times. I know Alex Newby wasn't involved. That may have been pretty significant because he has been at the heart of a lot of their creativity this season. To prevent Regan Linney from scoring a goal, that's impressive in itself, especially with a Fylde side that have actually been leaking quite a few goals this season. But yeah, it certainly does come as a shock, but it's a huge 3 points for Fylde. Altrincham, they are still in the top 7. I wouldn't expect them to go unbeaten between now and the end of the season. But it is definitely not one of those games where you think that they would be expected to drop points. And come the end of the season, it could be one of those really significant results, I think.
Yeah, it certainly could be. One big thing that needs to stay for this game, of course, Ethan Ross has been injured. Both of Fylde's goals, I have to admit, they were decent moves, but they were preventable. The actual shots, Caleb Ansen, I believe it is, who's coming on loan, was probably at fault for both goals, and I'd expect most keepers in this division to be able to stop those shots. So maybe that could be a potential issue for Altrincham. I know one game, you don't really want to look at that overall, but, they were 2 preventable goals, in my opinion, when I look at that, and I think most people's opinions. As for Fylde, that was a much-needed 3 points, losing on Tuesday night. The issue with Fylde is, and I feel like I'm going around in circles and repeating myself, but when they get a big win, or even just a win in general, they don't seem to be able to back it up. And this is the type of game now where they've gone away to Altrincham. I'd assume, I don't actually know what the next fixture is. I'll have to look at that shortly, but I'd assume they'll be at home. I think they'll be playing Tuesday night. I think they do have games in hand, so I would expect them to be playing in midweek. This is the type of game where Tuesday night they'll probably be back at home. They need to get back to winning ways. You look at some of the wins they've had this season. They beat a Solihull side at the start of the season. Gateshead they've beaten, Southend, Halifax. They've got a point away at Oldham early on in the season as well. This Fylde side is very capable of climbing up the table for me, and they've got some great individuals in that side. The first goal, yes, it was probably savable, but it was a great shot from Gavin Massey. Nick Horton, we don't really need to speak about him, but he ran the show in this game, and it's a great, huge 3 points for Fylde. But yeah, of course, for them, still inside the bottom four. As for Altrincham, I don't think it's a major concern for me because it was such a smash and grab. I think Fylde are very good. And one of the few things that they are very good at this season is being able to just catch teams out on the break. And I think that was the case for Altrincham. Both goals were really against the run of play when Altrincham have been on top. For me, I look at this and when I've watched the game back, it does just feel like the type of game where just nothing was really going for Altrincham in this game. So I think for them, they just need to get back to winning ways now. But they've got 3 away games in the league on the bounce. Of course, not playing on Saturday either because they're in the FA Trophy. This is the time now where I think Altrincham need to bounce back. And it's going to be interesting to see because they've been on great form recently. They've looked like the team to beat in the division alongside Barnet. And now they've had that defeat against the side that on paper you should be beating with some tough fixtures coming up. It'll be interesting to see where Altrincham are in the next month or so. And I think it's going to be, I think it's going to say a lot about what Altrincham can achieve this season on these next 3 games. Is that something you'd agree with?
I think Altrincham, they are, just on the edge of that playoff spot. So these next few games for them will be, particularly significant. See if they can maybe, just bridge that gap a little bit more. I know there is a little bit of a cushion between them and 8th place, but every point matters in this division. This could be the start of a bad run for them. You never know. That's the thing. Anything can happen. One thing that does intrigue me now is looking at the teams left in the FA Trophy. I do feel like Altrincham are probably the favourites to go and win it. What they prioritise between now to the end of the season does interest me, because I think they are certainly more than capable of winning that FA Trophy. But with extra games in that competition, it's always going to weigh down on the squad. I think it is going to be. If I were them, I would probably be trying to prioritise the top 7 because I think they are the kind of technical team who are capable of punishing a big side on a one-off, and I think that would give them a huge bonus in the playoffs. But yeah, they will have more games coming towards the end of the season than other sides, and I think that may be something to maybe keep an eye on. Yeah, I fully expect them to still finish in the top 7. Like I said, a very technical side. I don't know if maybe, like I said, the loss of Newby, he wasn't playing at the weekend. I actually don't know why he wasn't playing. I haven't looked into that, but he's been a significant player for them this season. But a bit on Fylde, I think. I think like as you mentioned, they've never really been able to follow up these big wins that they keep getting. And I think now it is for them a bit of a make or break. If they want to stay up in this division, they do have to do that eventually. It's a win against a decent side in this division. And like you said, I actually don't know who they're playing again this Tuesday or Saturday.
They're not playing Tuesday. I thought they would be, but it's away as well.
That is a tough game as well. But I wouldn't say it's any tougher than Altrincham away. So you never know with them. Like I said, I would like to see them try and maybe follow that with a draw or a result, because if they don't, then it is going to become too little, too late. It is still tight down the bottom. So these results mean everything. And I feel like every single week I say this when we talk about teams like Fylde, but Nick Horton, having a player like him in that team, that is a huge difference maker. And you look at the sides like Maidenhead, Braintree, Wealdstone, etc. They don't have a player of that caliber who can single-handedly go and win them a game. And I think that will come into Fylde's. That will come into Fylde's. It will play into Fylde's hands a bit. So it's it's a significant 3 points at both ends of the table, really. But I think, Fylde will be looking at that and hopefully trying to kick on. Whether their managerial situation is solved before their next game, I don't know. I don't really know who they'll be looking at. I've seen, Mike Williamson thrown around a few times. I think that'd be a very, very good addition. But, there's limited options at this stage in the season. And, if they keep winning without any manager, they might just give it to the interim till the end of the season. I'm not actually sure who that is, though. But like I said, it's a big result for both ends of the table. And, I think we should expect to see a few more of those kind of results between now and the end of the season. These big sides, they'll start to burn out a little bit, and these sides at the bottom will have a lot more to fight for. So I think it is the kind of result that we should probably expect to see a little bit more. But, like I said, it's a huge 3 points for Fylde.
I'm getting the impression that you feel that Mike Williamson is the best option for Fylde, but probably unrealistic. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, I think, if Fylde have a budget, then they're not one of the lower spenders in the division. But I think it would be a gamble for Williamson to take that job in the position they're in, because I don't think he's the kind of manager who should be managing in the National League North. If they were to go down, I think that would be, you'd probably look at that as a pretty poor move for him. But I also do think, without naming other teams, I think there will probably be some other teams in this division at the moment who may have a manager on the edge at the moment that, a manager like Williamson will be keeping an eye on to make sure, he can jump at an opportunity. But from a Fylde perspective, I think it'd be a superb addition. I don't think there's probably, like I said, I don't think there's a better name out there at the moment. But I think from a Williamson perspective, I'm not too sure it would be, the best move for him. And, like you said, I think it could be a little bit unrealistic.
Next game then, Boston United up against Eastleigh. Eastleigh came out 2-1 winners away from home. It was a really tight match, this. It could have gone either way. I think the difference is the fact that Eastleigh going forward just significantly a lot better. When you've got the likes of Tyrese Shade, that's something that Boston don't have to their disposal. At the moment, for me, Eastleigh, the side, they're on decent form themselves at the moment. That's the third win, I believe, on the bounce for them now. They're just 5 points off the playoffs. Tyrese Shade's second goal was such a good individual goal. For anyone who only wants to pick on certain matches, that's the type of match where I'd be looking to see the highlights just for that goal, because it's a great individual goal. As for Boston, it does feel like that was kind of their last chance, I suppose, to really carry on the momentum they've had recently. I think they're always going to have a lot of it's hard work to do based on that first half of the season. I think they only picked up 15 points in 23 games, 26 games, actually, I should say. And when you do that, and you've only got 20 games left, it's going to be really difficult to be able to survive this season. And although they've shown signs of potential promise to get out of the situation they're in at the moment, I think this defeat on Saturday, particularly being at home as well, shows to me that unfortunately that they're only heading in one direction, that is dropping back down into the National League North. It's projected that you need 50 points at the moment to survive in the National League. Of course, that changes all the time. It's gone up in the last couple of months compared to what it was looking like. It could even be higher than that come the end of the season. But for me, when you see Boston at the moment, I believe they're on 28 points, I believe they're on at the moment. I don't know if it's actually that many either. I think it is
23
points, I should say. Yeah. They're on at the moment. For me personally, they're going to need over double that to survive, and they're 2/3 of the season through. So it's going to be a big ask, isn't it, for Boston to survive this season? But as for Eastleigh, a big win for them, and their playoff dream is still certainly alive.
Yeah, for Eastleigh, they're in a brilliant little patch of form, and I feel like that's been a bit of a story of their season. They've never really managed to consistently put like decent points averages together. It's always been, we'll go and pick up 15 out of 21 points here, and then go and pick up 3 of the next 15 available. They've played in a lot of purple patches this season where they've gone and picked up points in big clusters and then lost a load of points in big clusters. That's the kind of inconsistency that the teams that will just fall short for me will end up having. You mentioned Tyree Shade. I was lucky enough to go and watch Eastleigh earlier in the season play against Braintree, and he's similarly to this game. He scored a brilliant individual goal. He is the talisman for them. Whereas some people thought, like Paul McCallum might be this season. He's really taken that team by the scruff of the neck, and he's become that key player for them. I believe he's got 9 goals, 6 assists this season. But if you look at some of the goals he scored this season, he's just made something completely out of nothing. And he's the kind of player that I think EFL teams will be looking at come the summer. So Eastleigh, they are in 8th now, but there is a bit of a gap between that, 8th and 7th place, 5 points at the moment, no games at hand. Whether these teams below the 7th place will be able to catch up with that, I don't know. But, like we said, anything can happen at this level. The one thing that I do look at Eastleigh, and as I said, it is their consistency. I do feel like, they'll put a good run together of matches and pick up a large chunk of points, but then they'll go and follow that up with a few losses in a row, and they can't seem to maintain that. Like they can't stay average is kind of what I'm trying to say. They're either at 100% or 0%. There's no in between.
You can't call them inconsistent, because at the moment they're very consistent at winning. But I think purple patch is probably the best way of explaining it. First third of the season, they looked like they were well on track to finish inside the playoffs. Then they had relegation form, and then they're now back to being on half decent form. So there's certainly a side that have got a lot of purple patches this season.
Yeah. So it's a weird one for them, really, because it depends what Eastleigh you get that turns up on the day. Really, they could absolutely blow a team away, but they could absolutely they could go and put out a really poor performance, and you question where they are in the league. As for Boston, I feel like again it's a similar thing to what we said with Fylde. They very rarely followed up these big results that they've picked up with a second result and managed to try and get that momentum going. They got a big win the other week, and against Fylde, I believe, and they've not built on it, and I think it might be a little too late now for them to maybe try and find that consistency. As you mentioned, 50 points to stay up. They'd have to more than double their points that they've picked up in 30 games in almost half the amount of matches. I think that would be a massively big ask for them. But I do look at Boston, they were kind of up against it from the get-go. They lost their best 2 strikers in pre-season, albeit Jimmy Knowles is now back there on loan. But that was a big loss, because Jimmy Knowles is back there now by himself, but it was him and Kelsey Mooney that works well off each other. So even though he's back at the club now, and that could be seen as a positive, he's not working off Mooney anymore, so they're not getting the best out of him. 27 points to stay up. I think it's a huge ask for them. I do think they'll pick up a few more results between now and the end of the season. I do think there is a side there that are capable of causing an upset. But, like I said, it's just too little too late. Small budget in this division. Location's a huge problem for them as well. They are, pretty much every away day for them is a 2-hour journey, which is very, very taxing on a team that are only a hybrid as well. I think that's possibly for them. I think that might be, hope's done for them in terms of survival. But, again, I'll sound like a broken record and saying anything can happen. You've seen miraculous escapes in the past, but it does seem like it might just be a little bit out of reach for Boston now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just finally as well on Tyree Shade, you mentioned Nick Horton be the type of player that can win a match on his own. I think Tyree Shade is also the type of player. I think he's very raw for me, but if I was to pick a side with the most potential in each position this season in the National League who could play at the highest level, I genuinely think Tyree Shade is the type of player for me that, although he's very raw at the moment, I think he's got so much potential. If you saw his highlights reel, it'd be something special to watch, to be fair. But he's just a little inconsistent. 1 week he could be on fire, and then next week you don't see him for 90 minutes. Very much like Oluwabor, he's just left Halifax and got a move to Exeter. He was another raw player as well. And I think there's a lot of similarities between him and Tyrese Shade. And I think for me, you've mentioned there about him getting a move into the EFL in the summer. I think he certainly will. And I think he deserves that. And I think he's very much capable of playing at a very high level in the future. Moving on to the next game now. Dagenham and Redbridge 2, Oldham Athletic 2. I'd say a poor point for both sides. Dagenham on horrendous form at the moment. They were this close to getting back to winning ways and getting that first win against Oldham, and Oldham managed to score a last-minute equaliser thanks to Pritchard, I believe, who scored that one. As for Oldham, it's good to be able to get a last-minute equaliser there, but coming into this game, you look at Dagenham, one of the most out-of-form sides in the division. Oldham just inside the playoffs at the moment, not in the best of form. I think for Oldham, they would have been looking into this game thinking, look, this is a Dagenham side low on confidence. We need to be going here and winning this game quite comfortably.
Yeah, like you said, I think it's probably an unfortunate result for both sides in the end. I think from a Dagenham perspective, if you were to go and say, oh yeah, you can take a point on the day before kickoff, I think you probably would have been quite happy with that. But it's the manner in which they've gone and lost the game, I think, is quite disappointing. Quite late in the match, 95th minute. That's a punch to the gut, and that could have been a huge 3 points for them in terms of surviving this season, because that relegation zone is really looming on them now. As for Oldham, they just can't seem to find that consistency they were able to find before Christmas, and I don't think that comes as much of a surprise, really. They've changed half their team in January, so expecting them all to gel and click together now, all of a sudden, just maintain the level they had before Christmas is a massive ask. Mike Fondop with another goal. He's on absolute fire this season. He's been the figurehead for Oldham. He's been the leading, the key man for Oldham this season at times. Scoring a hell of a lot of goals. I think that takes him to 16 for the season now, with some very crucial goals there. And as you mentioned, Joe Pritchard, last minute winner, equaliser for him. Sorry, and he assisted Fondop's goal too. He's a player that could really come to life at this level. He's a very, very good player for Accrington back a few seasons ago, but it hasn't quite worked out for him at MK Dons. I think that could be a bit of a gem of a signing. He adds that piercing pass into their team, where he can break that defensive line and, create something from nothing in that Oldham team maybe they've lacked. But yeah, there's a few similarities in these two teams at the moment, despite being each side of the opposite sides of the table. They both seem to be, a bit of unrest in the teams. Neither fan base seems to be particularly happy with where they're going. But yeah, I think, as you mentioned, it's probably a point each, where both teams would have been hoping for maybe more, seeing how the game played out.
There were boos from both sides of supporters as well at full time for this one. Of course, Oldham have dropped down to 5th now. Gateshead have overtook them in 4th place. And we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Gateshead being a side that are not confirmed to finish inside the playoffs yet and could easily fall out of it. And we've always said that we think Oldham will be fine and sit in 4th this season. I think now we have to consider Oldham as a side that could fall outside of the playoffs. You've got Halifax and Altrincham on decent form at the moment, looking to actually overtake Oldham. You've got Eastleigh and Southend right on the tails. Yes, Rochdale will be coming on to them shortly, but not in the best of form yet. But I've still got 4 games in hand on Oldham. And I think if they win all those games, they'll be level on points with them, which of course is a big ask. But still, if they did that, they would be level on points with Oldham. So for me, overall, we have to consider Oldham as a side that could slip outside of the playoffs. And the way they're performing at the moment, the only direction they're going to be going in is down. Barnet at home, the next game on Saturday. Their home record isn't particularly good, and coming up against top of the league Barnet, who seem like the team to beat at the moment, that's going to be a really difficult game. And they could have really have done with going to Dagenham and winning, and it was really a winnable game, because for me, Dagenham at the moment, they're a very, very poor side that's not got much confidence at all. Of course, Justin as well, he's out injured for Dagenham. Junior Moraes leaving the club as well. For me, this Dagenham side's a lot weaker than the side earlier on in the season, and they're not on the best of form at the moment at all themselves. Something I am finding interesting at the moment, you could do a full breakdown on why Oldham probably aren't as strong as what they were in that first half of the season, and do a separate video on this. But I have noticed Mickey Mellon is getting an awful amount of criticism recently, and a lot of Oldham fans are actually stating that he needs to leave the club. The issue I've got with that is the fact that Oldham, they can't just keep going through managers. David Unsworth, rightfully sacked. Yes, John Sheridan. I don't actually know if he was actually sacked there or it was kind of a mutual consent. I think he was only interim manager for that season. I might be totally off the scale when I say that. But yeah, I think Oldham, they can't just keep going through managers for me. So to sack Mickey Mellon would be very harsh at this stage of the season. I don't know what your thoughts are on that overall.
Yeah, it's a tricky one really, because when a team gets so close to maybe competing and then it all kind of crumbles, the thought of having to rebuild from scratch all over again is a bit of a painful thought. You don't want to have to go through that whole process of it being a bit gritty, and you want to try and maintain that level, and sometimes that just isn't possible. The question has to be raised, and I think that the question that is on a lot of Oldham fans' mind at the moment is the way that Mellon plays, and is the system he's setting out to play, is that going to be sustainable going forward? And it's a really tricky question to answer, because from looking at what I've seen, I actually don't think he's playing the system he wants to play. I think he's gone and fully aborted the way he wants to play. Mm-hmm. It's very direct now, and it's there doesn't really seem to be an identity, and it kind of seems like he doesn't really have the players to play the way he wants to do. Don't get me wrong, I think pre-Christmas, when they were at their best, I think they were very heavily individual reliant. I think there were flaws in the way that they played, and I think that was kind of the cracks were paved by the quality they had in their team. The likes of Sam Collyer, we talk about how important he was for Oldham at the time. He's thriving in League One now, and that just says as much as you need to know about how good of a player he is. And I think the quality he had, kind of paved the cracks for how all over the place their system could have been at times. So I think that maybe is the main argument from why Mellon could go. But then you also have to go and look at what he's done in the past, and he has got it promoted out of this division. And he is capable of attracting these big names. You've got to remember, he got Stones into the team in the first place. He got Clucas into the team in the first place. The likes of Pritchard, Jordan Rossiter, Tom Pett. These are all big names that he's attracting to the club. So there is these positives and negatives. But when you're sitting in fifth in the table, and a large reasoning for your downturn in form is probably the loss of individual players, it may be a bit harsh to blame it all on the manager. But no, it's a very tricky position for them to be in at the moment. And to be fair, when they were sitting in fourth, I would have gone and said, yeah, they're probably exactly where they should be. But now they're starting to tail away from that a little bit. And they had 3 wins in a row, or they beat Fylde, Rochdale, and Solihull. You look back at that now, and that's actually three sides who are really struggling now. So maybe that, at the moment, at the time they thought they were probably on the right track, maybe they just, got the luck of the draw and ended up playing 3 teams that are in bad form. But, a loss to Maidenhead at home, that's a tough one for Oldham to take. And I think, on the subject of Mellon, it's really difficult. I mean, I don't really have an answer, if I'm being totally honest. I can't really decide myself if I think, if he was to leave, whether it would benefit the club or not. But, I'm sure they'll probably come to a decision eventually on that. And I can see them sticking with him. And I can see them giving in until the summer again to try and rebuild. For all we know, they could be in League 2 next season. As long as they stay in that top 7, anything can happen. But it's a really weird limbo spot for them to be in at the moment, because they've shown so much promise, yet have also shown so much fragility at times. Mm-hmm. So it's you've got the best of both worlds, and you kind of just have to pick and choose now. What do you how much of the positives do you take out of it, and how much of the negatives do you take out of it, and how much do you use, and what do you judge them on now? Because it's been a really strange season for them.
Last season's problems have returned, I feel, for Oldham. Last season Oldham always used to be really poor at home, and they struggled to break sides down. They're probably better set up to actually kind of sit deep and be able to catch teams on the break. And I think that's something that feels like they're returning to playing that type of style like last season. And it's just simply not working. Last season away from home, I think Oldham's away form was pretty decent, but the home form was very poor. And that feels like it's the same again here. And as well, when you're on bad form and it does feel like the fan base is slightly turning against you, it's always difficult to get yourself back on good form. And that seems to be the issue, dropping points at Dagenham once again. There's a lot of pressure, I think, playing for Oldham. I think if there was a side for me where I feel there's the most pressure to play for in this division, it would be Oldham, because they're a very demanding fan base. I don't think there's a lot of clubs that don't want to be in this division, but particularly Oldham, I think they're a fan base, I think, that feel a little embarrassed to be playing in the National League. That's the impression I get. It's like, we've never been in this division before. We're a founding member of the Football League. We're ex-Premier League club. And I feel like there's a lot, they're very, very demanding there at Oldham, which, to be fair, I think most people would be if they supported Oldham. But rolling up at Oldham means there's a lot of pressure. And, of course, Clucas leaving, for me, when you're losing a player that's just gone on to join a League One club and he's doing brilliantly there, it's going to be always difficult to replace. I think he was the main key that made me feel, compared to last season, why they've improved a lot, because they had a ball-playing midfielder like that. I know we've mentioned about Tom Pett, haven't we? And a lot of Oldham fans rate him quite highly. But I can't imagine he's on the same level as Clucas, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think many midfielders are. Of course, Just Stone's leaving. Yes, that's a big loss. I was more concerned about losing Clucas. Of course, he's been replaced with Billy Waters, who I don't think's got off to the best of starts there. It's a bit of a weird signing. I don't particularly feel he fits into Oldham's system. But no, I just feel Oldham, they've kind of been a bit desperate with those replacements overall. And I feel last season's problems are returning once again. But yeah, playoffs for me, I think I'd still expect them to finish inside the playoffs this season because of that first half of the season. They should be able to do it. Finally, on Dagenham then, of course, that if they'd have won that game, they'd be 2 points better off than what they are now. They'd be 4 points above the drop. Instead, they're 2 points above the drop, with sides all below them having games in hand. And as well, in the final 15 games or so for Dagenham, they've got 4 of the top 7 still to play, and 3 of those are all away, including Barnet away. So, yeah, it's going to be a difficult and nervous end to the season for Daggers fans at the moment. Moving on to the next game then, Wealdstone versus Ebbsfleet. A huge win for Wealdstone. That means it's their 3rd win on the bounce. Well and truly out of that drop zone now. As for Ebbsfleet, it's another defeat for them. I think their season was over a long time ago. But as for Wealdstone, they're the type of games that you need to be winning. And it does set them up nicely with Boston at home on Saturday, I believe.
Yeah, it's a massive win for Wealdstone. They seem to really be finding their way under the new management. It's 3 wins on the bounce, as you mentioned. And not only is it 3 wins on the bounce, but it's 3 wins, maybe Yeovil you could take out of that, bottom category. I don't think they're quite in it. But, wins against Ebbsfleet and Braintree, these are the teams, if you want to stay up at this division, you need to be beating, because not only are you taking points away from the people around you, but you're also catching up on them. It's a great upturn in form. And, like you said, the next 3 games, Boston, Aldershot, Tamworth, 3 even more important games, these teams around them. And if you go and pick up 6-7 points in those games, you would feel that Wealdstone are probably in the position to be more than comfortably surviving. Alex Reid with a brace again. That's very positive to see, because maybe he hasn't come and performed, or he hasn't been on as good form as he was maybe on his first spell, albeit that being exceptionally good form. So maybe it's unfair to suggest that he should be meeting those levels yet again. But no, they seem. The one thing I always like about Wealdstone is they have an identity about them. And they have a specific style of football that they go out to play. They don't worry too much about the opposition and how they're going to play. They focus on their own game and how they're going to, put the ball back in the net. It's as simple as that, really. They've got that possession-based football that they like to play, that 3-4-1-2 formation where they try and double up on the centre-backs, the back line with their 2 centre-forwards, and they try and pressure teams. And, it works. And there was a bit of a scare against an Ebbsfleet team who have improved, and I think will probably feel a bit hard done by at times this season to maybe not have picked up a win here and there. But it's a big result for Wealdstone. Like I said with Ebbsfleet, they do seem to have been improving slowly but surely each week. But I think that one will be a bit of a punch to the gut for them. To be a goal up twice in the game I think fans probably thought it was going to be their week. It was probably an opportunity for them to pick up some points. These points may not go towards survival at this stage, because I think they are probably too far out. But it goes to raising the morale in the team, and getting this team riled up and the fans excited and giving them something to cheer about. And I think this probably is the biggest blow for them so far, because just when you feel like you're getting somewhere, you kick back down again. They have improved, like I said. The likes of Aaron Bolger coming in as well in midfield. It's given, and George Moncur and stuff like that. It's given them identity as well. They go out and they try and make it hard for teams to break them down. They're quite well structured again. Their shape when they played against Woking was it was clear, and it was they had a game plan. But yeah, I think it's been the same case for a while now. I think they're probably long gone, and I think their chairman released a statement quite recently, basically suggesting, talking about what their plans going forward are going to be. They admit they put their hands up, got it wrong in the summer transfer window, which is pretty evident. But no, I think with Ebbsfleet fans and people at the club, I think it is really as simple now as if they haven't been already, just looking forward to next season, hopefully putting a title charge together in the National League South.
As for Wealdstone, Harrison Sonia got a brace as well. Of course, he's on loan from Cheltenham. His second goal was an excellent free kick as well. Does feel like Wealdstone, in terms of recruitment during the season, have been excellent. The likes of Alex Reed's come in. Defensively, they've brought a couple of defenders in as well, which was much needed. But Harrison Sonia, another youngster who's come on loan from Cheltenham with a brace on Saturday, and an excellent second goal for him as well. Will certainly go a long way. What I have noticed about Wealdstone as well, if you look at the previous 3 games, they've not done it the easy way. They've not comfortably or even grinded out a 1-0 win. They've gone 1-0 down against Ebbsfleet and Braintree and managed to come back. Yeovil as well. Yeovil equalised against them. So what I am impressed by is the fact that they're able to find ways to win, and that's something that's crucial, and that suggests to me a side that's capable of surviving this season. The only concern recently might be the amount of goals that they are conceding. I know they've won the previous 3, but in the past 4 games they've conceded 8 goals. So for me, that might be somewhere they'd like to strengthen potentially if they are able to do that. Of course, Jack Cook as well, I believe, is out injured at the moment. He's been injured for quite some, I think, in the previous 4 games now.
I think he came on at the week. I think he came on at the weekend. He's just come back. I think he played 30 minutes.
Because if you look at the goals that Wealdstone actually conceded against Ebbsfleet, they were both from set pieces or crosses. And for me, I think if Jack Cook was there, I'd like to think of that at least one of those wouldn't have actually gone in. So with him returning, that would be huge for Wealdstone going forward. And you look at the next few fixtures now. You've got Boston at home, a side that some are now suggesting are pretty much down. I think we can both kind of agree with that ourselves. Followed by Tamworth away, who recently at home have shown in a way that they are capable of losing. Anything can happen at the moment. Moving on to the next game. Of course, we're coming on to your boys now. A strong point for you. Forest Green Rovers won. Woking won. Spoke a lot about Forest Green off air. Me and Paul on Thursday were speaking about them being involved in the title race. I've always felt that out of the 3 sides, they will be the side to fall away because of the lack of depth in that squad. For me, at the moment, the results recently suggest to me that York and Barnet are far superior than them. And although Woking have improved recently, it's a very good point for them. I think when you're coming up at home against a side in the bottom half, when you're in a title race, you'd like to think you'd go on to win that game. But no, finished Forest Green Rovers won, Woking won.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I feel like it's been a common theme when teams have played Forest Green this season. They come away saying, kind of questioning why they're up there, based off of the performance they had. And to be fair, I've got to agree. I didn't think that they looked like a team who are competing for the title in this division. If you were to blindly watch that game, and you wouldn't be able to tell which side were up there and which side were down in 16th, especially in the first half. I think Woking were the better side. They had spells in the second half. Forest Green, it was a much more level match, but it it wasn't. They definitely didn't look like a side who were going to confidently go and pick up 5 or 6 wins in a row now and put themselves back in a title race. They seemed very direct, quite slow paced. I was quite impressed with Jordan Garrick when he came on. Actually, he got the equaliser for them. He looked sharp. He looked like he added a bit of pace to their team. But no, I agree. I don't think they've quite got it in them now to maybe amount a title charge. But I think they do play the kind of gritty football that will kind of that might be a bit of a tough roadblock in terms of playing them in the playoffs. As for my team, Woking, it's a bit of a bittersweet one, really, because I feel like 3 points would have been absolutely brilliant, of course, but you can never complain about a point against a team like Forest Green. We set out a game plan. We played a bit of a weaker team as well, the likes of Lewis Walker, Denon Lewis, Tunji Akinola back in midfield. We've played Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. We've had a huge run of games recently, and we've had to rotate quite a lot. We put a good performance in. My big concern now, though, is the weekend. FA Trophy quarter-final against Oxford City, which is a bit of a weird match for me. I'm working at Oxford City at the moment, but we lost Matt Ward to injury at the weekend. We lost Junior Moraes to injury at the weekend. Tariq Hines got sent off as well for very kicking the ball away very, very stupidly. So now it's going to be interesting to see how we react to that. It's been exceptional under Ardley so far. 1 loss in 14 games, I believe it is now. We can't complain with that. It's been a fair few draws in there, but rather than when we were under Doyle getting before he got relieved of his duties, we were very much looking over our shoulder, very, very worried about relegation. Now we're looking upwards. We're looking, how high can we finish in this league? Next season, can we, amount to something, better like we did under Sol? Because there's a clear identity about the way we play, and Ardley, he's a gritty manager. He's shored up the defensive options we've got. We do look structurally much better, and defensively stronger. Quick word on Harry Beautyman as well. He's been a superb signing this season. Double figures in goals now. He's been a pretty key asset to us this season, and hopefully be able to keep hold of him next season. He's getting on a bit, but he's aging like a fine wine. He's playing extremely well for us. But yeah, I think some fans will probably be a bit disappointed to maybe not get 3 points. But I think when you look at the bigger picture, we probably would have been very happy with 1 point coming into the match. So yeah.
Yeah, disappointing result for Forest Green Rovers. It does feel like their title charge is slipping away slightly. But like you've mentioned there, you mentioned about them having grit, and I think that's something that's crucial inside the playoffs. It's never really the actual best side inside the playoffs that often goes up. It's always the side that's got a lot of grit about them and able to grind out results and have that never say die attitude. And that's something that Forest Green Rovers have done, even in this match, going 1-0 down. They often do concede early at home this season, but they've always found a way to get back into the game, and they are still unbeaten at home. Moving on to the next one, Maidenhead 0, Yeovil 2. A damaging result for Maidenhead. A game that going into that game, you'd probably say quite a winnable game for them. Yeovil been on quite poor form recently, of course, losing to Wheelstone last week. I do believe they won in midweek, though. It's going to be a big week for Maidenhead. Of course, that defeat now means they've got York City on Tuesday night, and then followed by Forest Green Rovers. That's 2 tough games at the moment. As for Yeovil now, 7 points off the playoffs. For me, it's unrealistic for them to finish inside now, because when we say 7 points, sides above them have got games in hands, and as well for Yeovil as well. I just don't think they've got the quality to be able to finish inside the playoffs this season. So for me, they're one of the few sides that haven't really got too much to play for now. I can't see them going down. Probably only need another 5 points to actually secure safety this season. But as for Maidenhead, yeah, that's a damaging result. Considering you go into that, you'd see that as quite a winnable game.
Yeah, off the back of a 1-0 win away to Oldham as well, you'd really hope you look at the Yeovil game and think, that's the kind of game we can pick up another result from, and maybe pull a bit further away from the drop zone. But they find themselves back in the bottom 4 again because of that result, and probably won't be very happy about that. We talk quite a lot about Maidenhead and how Devonshire always finds a way. We've also spoken this season about Maidenhead and how maybe they've got a bit of a bit more technical side this season that doesn't suit Devonshire's style of football. I would still also be maybe not super shocked to see them go down, but I also still think they will find a way. But having looked at the coming fixtures for them, I do think, a 2-0 loss to Yeovil was a pretty damaging one. They've got York at home next, Forest Green away after that. Big game against Braintree, but then that's followed up by Sutton and Gateshead, who are, two tough sides yet again. So, it's not an easy run in for Maidenhead at this stage of the season, and they really need to try and pull out some big results now to, drift away from that relegation zone, because, it could finally be their year. Personally, I don't think so. But, this is probably as close as they've left it most in previous seasons. But yeah, Yeovil, they've, that's 2 wins on the bounce for them now. And like you said, I think it's probably playoffs is a bit out of reach for them at this stage. The one thing that disappoints me a little bit with Yeovil is I do think they probably could have had a higher ceiling this season. I look at that team that lined up against Maidenhead on Saturday, and it's completely different to the team they started the season with. They've had a lot of change in that squad, and there's been a lot of change in that team as well that I don't think was particularly warranted at times. And I think that's maybe unsettled the team a little bit. They've been on a pretty tough run. There's been a bit of unsettled at the club as well. But it's hard to find that consistency when you're kind of chopping and changing your team every single week. But nonetheless, it's two wins on the bounce for Maidenhead for Yeovil now, I believe, which is that's a step in the right direction for them. But yeah, having watched them play a few times this season, I do think that there is some very glaring issues in the team that they've got, and I think the tempo in which they play at is a huge concern for them. They play very slowly, and it allows teams to find their structure easier. And it means Yeovil struggle to break teams down a lot more. I do like the addition of Cairo Wilson recently on loan from Swansea. He does seem to inject a bit of pace into their side. I'd say same about James Plant as well, but he's gone off now. He went off injured, and I believe he's out for the season, which is a massive blow for them, really. But yeah, like you said, I feel like they're probably maybe a game or two away from playing for nothing really this stage of the season now, Yeovil. I can't really see them pushing for playoffs, and I can't really see them getting dragged into a relegation scrap. So, I think it's they're probably looking a bit into next season now, and, what they can do to, maybe push themselves up the table a little bit more.
I think in terms of when you get promoted into the National League, to just have stability for that first season is crucial. And I think all Yeovil fans will have taken that to start the season. Perhaps a section of the fan base would have liked to think, based on the start, that they could have put a push together to finish inside the playoffs. For me personally, I look at the squad. I just don't think going forward they have enough quality for me to actually finish inside the playoffs this season. And I don't think they've really been able to compete with those sides in the top 7 when they've actually come up against those sides either. Moving on to the next game now, we've got Rochdale 0, Barnet 4. Barnet are just ruthless at the moment. To go and defeat York in midweek, to then go away to Rochdale and back it up with a 4-0 victory speaks volumes and suggests to me that they're well on their way to getting out of this division this season. Of course, there's still a third of the season to go, but the way they're playing at the moment, it certainly is theirs to lose.
Yeah, I feel like I've got to put a bit of an apology out to Barnet, really, because I feel like all season I've kind of neglected how good of a team they really are. They're absolutely flying. That's 19 games unbeaten now, 7 points clear of the top, albeit York have 2 games in hand. But even then, York are, they're kind of flip-flapping here and there. They're dropping points against certain teams, but I think it's Barnet's to lose now, isn't it? They're a team absolutely flying. Rochdale are no slouches. I know they're not in the best of form, but to go to their place and absolutely tear them apart 4-0 is massive. Is mightily impressive. That's if beating York in midweek wasn't enough of a statement, following up with a 4-0 win, it is. It adds a cherry on top really for them. And, it's not even like they're at full strength either. They're missing a few key players, the likes of Mark Shelton's missing. Danny Collins is currently suspended. They're having to play, maybe in a way that they don't want to play, but they're extremely relentless. following the York game, there was quite an interesting comment made by Dean Brennan, and how he's having to deal with things with the club and maybe the board that he doesn't feel like he should deal with. Maybe hinting towards, maybe hinting towards a bit of unrest with the and a bit of a dispute with the ownership at the club and how much money they're investing into the team. But with the team they've got now, I don't think that I think they're more than capable of going and seeing out this division and winning it now. They're an exceptional team, but when you look at Rochdale, I think you'd be really kicking yourself. I don't know if you go to Barnet or Barnet come to you and you'd expect you're guaranteed a result, but I feel like the manner in which they've lost this game it's not really ideal for them. I do feel like Rochdale have had this win taken out of their sails a little bit based off the amount of games they've had postponed, and now they have to play a hell of a lot of games all in one. That's 4 draws and 2 losses in their last 6 games in all competitions. And they're failing to score goals as well. They've scored 1 goal in their last 5, which is really not good for them. They've had a few inconsistencies up front this season, a few injuries with Cairo Mitchell being out for a spell. Devante Rodney's struggles with staying fit, but I look at that Rochdale team and I actually think the biggest loss for them this season has been Aaron Henry's injury, and when he went back to Charlton because of it. They like to play possession football, and he was kind of that. He was kind of to Rochdale what Anthony Hartigan is to Barnet, where he dictates the play, he controls the tempo, and he's that kind of technical man in midfield who can make things happen and progress the ball. They never really replaced James Henry, and I think that's showing as a huge flaw in their season now. And we've gone from speaking about Rochdale being a team that you fully expect to get into the playoffs, and now you're looking at them and thinking, well, that's going to be a bit of an ask now, because these games in hand that you thought would kind of really push them into that top 7 quite comfortably, really haven't gone to plan, and they've dropped points where they shouldn't have. The Ebbsfleet draw is a huge drop, a huge punch in the gut to them. But it's a tricky situation for them now, and it's not going to get any easier with the amount of fixtures they've got remaining. But yeah, it's a disappointing way for Rochdale to go and lose despite what the opposition are.
1 win in 6 for Rochdale. I kind of did expect, and I have mentioned a few times that although they've had these games in hands, for me, I think I've always thought Rochdale would struggle because, they've got the FA Trophy, they've got other things to consider, the pitch issues as well. They've got an awful amount of home games to play. They've got Saturday, Tuesday. It's going to be relentless for them until the end of the season. And the form recently, they've had some tough fixtures, but it suggests to me that perhaps Rochdale will not even finish inside the playoffs this season. Of course, yes, it's very much in their hands. But when I watched the highlights of that Barnet game, there's no shame in losing to Barnet, but the gift of Barnet, the 3 points. All 4 goals for me were avoidable goals. There were mistakes. They were giving possession away in bad areas as well. And on the forward front as well, we speak about defensively. I know you mentioned it there. They've only scored 1 goal in the previous 5 games. And, when you're conceding a lot of goals and then also not scoring them, for me, I think Rochdale are going to really struggle to finish inside the playoffs this season, particularly because, Halifax and Altrincham are so relentless at being able to keep grinding out results. They're not slipping up. They're not going on bad runs of forms either. And there's only 7 spots this season. And at the moment, Rochdale are a side for me that seem to be falling off. And they've got an awful amount of games to play as well. Also to mention, they've got some tough fixtures still to play. Although they've just played Halifax, Southend and Barnet in the last 7 days. They've actually now still got Gateshead at home. They've got Oldham away. They must play Altrincham twice, of course, in the FA Trophy, which is separate, but to play them at home and then to play them again at home in the league, it's going to be testing. And even the so-called poorer teams, they need to be playing a side who are going to be really desperate to survive this season. The likes of Aldershot, Maidenhead away, Wealdstone as well. It's going to be a really tough end to the season for Rochdale for me, and of course York as well to still come to Rochdale's ground this season. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult end for me, and they really need to get back on form soon. Otherwise, They won't be finishing inside the playoffs this season, but just finally on Barnet, yeah, huge win for them away from home. To back that up after just beating York at home just speaks volumes about them, and they're just so ruthless at the moment. And they've got Oldham away, and then after that they've got a few favourable fixtures, and it does feel like it certainly is theirs to lose at the moment, but. Of course, a lot can change very quickly. Moving on to the next game, Solihull Moors 1, Gateshead 3. Solihull's bad run of form under Matt Taylor continues. As for Gateshead, it does feel like they found a new spring of life after a bit of a difficult January transfer window for them, particularly not just with losing players, but with results as well.
Yeah, it's a very telling game for both sides, really. It's been a bit of a tough period for Gateshead. They've had a few inconsistencies, but they do seem to kind of be on track again now. They put an absolute blockbuster on against Sutton the other week. To go out and albeit Solihull aren't in great form, go and win that game with some real conviction. It's going to put some confidence in the fans. It's going to put some confidence in the players. Like we said, we were talking about a few weeks ago, maybe Gateshead struggling and maybe just clinging on to that top 7. Like we say it all the time as well. This league can change in a matter of a week, and suddenly they've gone back to looking like they're going to quite comfortably finish in that top 7 and maybe even push into that 4th spot. So it says a lot about how quickly this division can change. And I think that also leads on to Solihull Moors and how poor their form has been since the arrival of Matt Taylor. He's picked up 1 point in, I think, eight games, which is an absolutely diabolical record. I'm not often vocal about the negative side of the league, but I think there's a really, really poor appointment for Solihull Moors, and I think it's put them in a really terrible position. And as extreme as this sounds, if this form continues for much longer, they're going to be really close to that drop zone as well, similarly to how Dagenham have been this season, but on a bigger scale. This is relegation form for them, and although I fully don't expect them to get relegated, it's a horror position for their fans to be in. They've gone from having Andy Wing and hopes of the playoffs to 8 games later, having near enough no chance of the playoffs now, and having to actually look over their shoulder. It's a horrible position for them to be in, and as harsh as it sounds, I cannot see that changing for Solihull.
No,
until they make some sort of change up top. They credit some maybe something that can be pointed out is they do have a few injuries. Wilkinson's been out for a while. Stevens is still out. Wilkinson did come back and get the assist for the goal this weekend off the bench. So they have been missing some firepower. Obviously, Tavon Campbell is a very, very good player at this level. Has been out almost all season now. So it's not been smooth sailing really for Taylor in terms of options that they've been able to play. But I just look at the teams he's putting out still, and there's 6 defenders in the lineups he's playing each week, and it doesn't particularly look like they're actually going out to win games. And they played Woking at midweek, and having watched that game, they didn't really put up a fight. They had 2 shots all game, and we sat back for the last 15 minutes and almost invited them to attack us and try and pick up a result, and they just couldn't. They seemed like they just had nothing about them. They had no confidence, no style of play, nothing, and that's really concerning to me for Solihull. And I think come the end of the season, they could be in a really bad position in the league compared to where they should have been aiming for, which is something nobody expected this season really.
Considering that after Andy Wing left the club, they actually made a point about, we understand that we've underachieved so far this season, and now we're looking to appoint a manager that can set out to reach the goals we set at the start of the season and finish in the playoffs. Considering they were 8th at the time they said they were underachieving, they're now 14th. I wonder what that actually suggests to you. But yeah, the whole appointment, we spoke about it quite a lot. It's one of the most backwards appointments I've ever seen. Appointing a manager that was at a side, sitting in the relegation zone with a side, to appoint a manager from them is just very odd and strange for me, and just lacks a lot of ambition for a side like Solihull Moors when you look at that squad in Matt Taylor. And I do genuinely feel that they've appointed him purely because of what he achieved in his playing career rather than his actual managing ability, because even prior to Wealdstone, I'm not very up to date with the EFL, but you look at what he's done then, and he's not done the best of jobs at the clubs he was at prior to Wealdstone. But no, finally for Wealdstone, Malcolm and Hannett seem to be the perfect duo going forward. They seem to be scoring all the goals at the moment. Hannett as well. I think that's now 15 goals for him, 13 goals, I should say, for the season. So he's overtaken Oseni now in the amount of goals he's scored. Of course, Oseni's gone on to leave the club to join St Mirren, but it's promising signs for Gateshead. 11 goals in 4 games as well. A lot of talk about the players going forward that they've lost. They've seemed to replace them. All other players have managed to step up perfectly, I should say, recently. Moving on to the next game, Tamworth versus Southend finished a 1-1 draw between both clubs. I think we can all agree it was going to be a low-scoring game, this one. Two sides very good defensively, but neither seemed to score too many goals. As for Tamworth, I think it's a good point for them, and I think it's a good point for Southend. But as for Tamworth, I think for them now, any point, doesn't matter if it's home and away, it's a good point. They just need to hit that 50-point margin and be able to secure safety for this season, which they're well on track to do. As for Southend, I don't think it's an awful point for them away from home. At Tamworth, it's been a difficult place to go overall this season. So, yeah, strong point for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, from a Tamworth perspective, like you said, I think any point's very, very important for them at this stage. Considering they were probably the shoe-in to finish rock bottom this season, to be almost safe already is a huge achievement for them. They are serial overachievers after all, so maybe it was probably a bit harsh in hindsight for some people to suggest that they were going to finish bottom. And to be fair, that one of those people were me. And I hold my hands up to that. But yeah, I think most were. That's the thing. Which makes it even more impressive what they're doing. To be fair, they're not they're not secretive about the fact that they like the dark arts. They like to try and go out and bully teams and play this like physical, gritty football. They're not out there trying to play this like beautiful tiki-taka football. They're trying to play this efficient football that keeps them up, and it has. I think I could quite confidently say, unless something absolutely insane happens, and they'll probably be in the National League next year again. So for them, yeah, I mean, it's a good point for them. Any point for them at this stage of the season is a very good point. As for Southend, I'm on the fence really about how good of a point that actually is, because I think Southend, they'll be looking at them playoffs still. Whether they're actually capable of getting into them is a different story, but I think they'll be hoping that they can maybe make a late charge. I do think they're a side who've probably underachieved this season in terms of what they have in their squad. But I think their big downfall this season's been the lack of goals. Like you said, they had Peppel at the start of the season, who's gone on to Chesterfield now, but they never really replaced him. Obviously they've added Tom Hopper and Charlie Kendall. This might sound a bit harsh, but I could have told you before Kendall signed for them that he wouldn't have been the answer to their goals. Especially if he's the one having to come in and replace Peppel. And I think he's got a couple of assists, but he's only got 1 goal so far in 13 games. He was a very hot and cold player. He'd come out one day and be the best player on the pitch, and then he'd come out the next day and be almost non-existent. But they're a very well structured side, Southend, but I don't think they've got that that bite in the team and that like killer pass and that end product that they need to finish in that top 7. And I think, the best comparison I can make to that is, if you were to compare them to Altrincham this season, you look at Altrincham and they are deadly up front. You give the likes of Newby and Linney a chance, and they'll put that away more times than not. I don't think Southend have that kind of player. They have, they've got the likes of Bon, Hopper, Kendall, even Danny Waldron. But I don't think they've got that killer in their attacking ranks at the moment that can really put a game to bed for them. And I think that's kind of shown at the weekend.
Next game then, Sutton 1, Braintree 1. Sutton a little bit like Yeovil to me. You can compare them quite a lot, of course, first season in the National League. I don't think they either have got particularly much to play for now this season. Of course, the more optimistic fans will look at Sutton and still feel that they're in with a shout of making the playoffs. As for Braintree, I think a decent point for them. Of course, looking to try survive this season now. Of course, no clubs have really done them any favours this weekend higher up the league. Of course, dropping points to sides around them, meaning that I think they're right back in the thick of this relegation battle now after they were looking to get away from it. But no, a good point for Braintree, I'd say.
Yeah, especially after their loss to Wealdstone in midweek. They're probably a bit disappointed about that after being a goal up. They've been in good form, and like you said, it did look like they were maybe going to pull away for a second from that relegation scrap, but then again, drags right back into it. That's how it happens at this level. But no, yeah, like I think it's a good point from a Braintree perspective. Again, I think there'll be another team that stay up this season. I think they've got enough, they've got enough in their team to keep them up. If you look at some of the individuals in the team that they've got, I think there's some real quality. The likes of Lisby, the experience that Akinde brings up front. I'm a huge fan of George Langston at centre back as well. I think he's a proper leader and he can control that back line very well. From a Sutton perspective, I think it's probably a game at home they would have liked to pick up 3 points from. But all in all, it's not the end of the world. I think mid-table for Sutton this season, I don't think is the end of the world, although they would have liked to maybe push on for a playoff spot. When you look at the bigger picture, they hired a manager in the middle of last season almost with the idea that they were going to get relegated, and they went and almost rebuilt their whole team. I think if you look at their starting 11, I believe only Josh Coley and Ryan Jackson. And yeah, I believe even if you look at the bench as well, I think Josh Coley, Ryan Jackson, and that's excluding, academy products in the side. They're the only two senior players that they've retained that were in the matchday squad from last season. They've basically built a whole new squad. And to be fair, when you look at the bigger picture, you see a lot of sides come down at this level, underestimate the division and end up in a relegation fight. Oldham had that first season, Scunthorpe had that and did go down in the end. It's a bit of a reality check at this level. So, and I think the way that they've gone and rebuilt their side this season has, shown that they didn't underestimate this level. And, they're willing to, stay here for a few years to maybe find their feet, because it was clear they did need a rebuild. So yeah, all in all, like I said, it's probably a game they would like to win, but I don't think they complain with a point overall. And I think next season they could be a side I look at that could really kick on, because that side's got some real potential.
York 2, FC Halifax Town 2. My team, a Yorkshire derby, of course. The mighty Sherman went 3-0 up, 2-0 up. I wish we did go 3-0 up. 2-0 up in the first 3 minutes. And York managed to get back into the game thanks to a penalty scored by Ollie Pearce. I keep getting his first name mixed up, but it is Ollie Pearce. And then, of course, in the dying stages of the game, Callum Howe, one of the best centre-halves in this division, managed to go up the other end and score a last-minute equaliser from a beautiful crossing, I will be honest. But no, I think from a Halifax perspective, now it's less sour. And for those who watch my vlog will have also heard my reaction, and it stays the same. It's a good point away at York. They've only dropped points at home prior to that game 3 times all season. It's just disappointing that we were this close to going away to York and getting all 3 points. As for York, although they've scored that last-minute equaliser, I still think it's a lot better point for Halifax, considering other results, than it is for York. York have allowed Barnet to extend their gap between them and Barnet by 9 points now from 7. Of course, York have games in hand, but even if they win those, they would still be, I believe, 4 points behind Barnet now. So it's really is in Barnet's hands to win this title. But no, just from an external perspective, you looking at this game, overall thoughts?
Yeah, I think overall, I think York could be happy with a point to snatch a point of the death. It's better than nothing, but I think at the end of the day, it's a slip up for them. An absolute nightmare start, really. To be 2 goals down after 3 minutes is not what any team wants. Any team that no one wants to be in that position. Halifax again. I think it's very comparable for them to the Dagenham Oldham game. I think pre-match you would have happily taken a draw. But the way the game's turned out, it's going to sting to concede so late, and it's the manner in which the draws come about. I think it's probably going to hurt a lot more than it would if you made to draw the game, in just the normal fashion. But it does show that the grit that York have as a team, and they do have that kind of never say die attitude. And that will probably get them far. But I think it's hard to not look at it as a bit of a slip up. Because it's given Barnet a bit, it's bridged the gap really. That they're not going to want to, they're not going to want to have to Barnet now. And for a team that are 19 unbeaten like Barnet are, they've shown they're consistent. They've shown that they rarely do slip up. So, York being in a position now in which they they could go and win every game from now to the end of the season and still not win the league. It's not a good position for them to be in. Actually, Nathaniel George seeing red isn't ideal either. I personally, I've had a few debates online with some people. I think it is a red card. It was late. Oh no, not late. Late. I don't know how to word it. The follow through. It's caught him studs up on the ankle. You can't really argue with that.
Because I think he tried to. I've mentioned off air, I'm not the best at analysing fouls. That's why I've stayed quiet on it. But my take is, I think he was late slightly, but I don't think he maliciously went in to foul the play. I think he actually tried to get the ball and the challenge has just gone wrong. And because he's kind of two-footed him, of course, it was accidental. The ref's got to give a red card.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I don't think he's meant it at all. Most red cards, people don't really mean it, but, that doesn't make you immune to being sent off. And I feel like that's probably the argument that's been thrown around a little bit. We didn't mean it. It wasn't reckless, but at the end of the day, you've caught someone high on the ankle. So what can you do? But, you're back to the actual game. York are capable of bouncing back. And I think now more than ever, they need a big result to back up, what's been a bit of a tough week for them. And at the end of the day, come the end of the season, you never know that 1 point that they've picked up late, that could be a huge point come the end of the season. But their next game's midweek away to Maidenhead. If I'm on a bad run in this league, and I with my team, if I was to support a team who was on a bad run in this league and need to bounce back, one of the last places I'd want to go is away to Maidenhead on a Tuesday night. Yeah, it is an absolutely brutal place. And it's a bit of a staple of the National League, really. And it highlights that, anyone can beat anyone at this level. And, just because these teams are part-timers doesn't mean that they can go and they're just going to kneel down and accept defeat, especially when they've got so much riding on survival this season as well now. But yeah, it's going to be a tough match for them again Tuesday. But, they're a very, very very capable side, and I can see them bouncing back, and I can't see them falling away from the title race. But it's a slip up, and it's not a position they ideally want to be in, given how the season's gone so far.
I think they'll be on the tail of Barnet until the end of the season for me, York. But I think it changes very quickly. A lot of our opinions have changed completely compared to what we said 2 weeks ago. We've both said York will win the league. It's hard to really stick by that at this moment in time. I did say at the start of the season Barnet would win the league. I don't know who you said at the start of the season.
I actually said Solihull, believe it or
not.
We don't.
I did that. The season Notts and Wrexham won the league, Solihull finished 15th, and I actually backed Solihull to win the league that season. So, yeah, you're not the only one there, to be fair. If we went through the predictions, they'd be horrendous, to be honest, I think, for everyone's.
Yeah.
But no, Barnet I had at the start of the season. And then after York's start and the additions that they made, I felt they were really in the driving seat. But, after this week, I think it has said a lot, particularly because it feels to me like Barnet have actually got stronger as the season's gone on. I thought they started pretty well overall. I say pretty well. I know they had a few defeats earlier on, but they've got better and better as the season's gone on. They're unbeaten at home still. The lack of goals that they're actually conceding at the moment just says a lot to me, because Barnet have always been known as a side that score a lot but often concede probably too many for a side that's in a title race. Whereas at the moment, defensively, they're so strong whilst also scoring probably the same amount of goals as what they were doing. So for me, I think no one can really see past Barnet at the moment. There's nothing to suggest that they're not going to go on to win the league, particularly as well because I think York have probably got a more difficult end to the season than Barnet on paper at this moment in time. But yeah, as for Halifax, it's a good point. I think with Altrincham losing, it's only like us winning, but Altrincham also winning. So I think it's more for the bragging rights, going away to York and saying you've won there. That's what's more dampening as well, conceding so late on. I think if York could have got back into the game sooner, like if they'd have scored in that first half to go 2-2 or scored up to probably the 70th minute, I'd be coming away from that thinking, that's a pretty good point there. Whereas obviously with them conceding so late on, it's a little bit more sour. But no, I think it's a good point. The only thing I will say, I don't understand York fans complaining over the amount of time wasting we were doing. Every side time waste, and I didn't notice it any more than normal. I didn't think we were going overboard when we were doing it. if they thought that, they should come up against Maidenhead because they're very well known for it, or even Fylde a couple of weeks ago. So for me, overall, yeah, I think that's a little petty from York fans, if I'm being honest. Every side time waste. You're away at probably one of the most difficult places to go at. In the league, the amount of money you've spent on that squad, there's players in there that can do a job in League One. And, you look at our squad and we've got one of the lowest budgets in the league. I don't really blame us for slightly time wasting and over exaggerating. Yeah. So for me, overall, it's a strong point. The one thing I will say positively about York from that game is they do seem to have this never say die attitude. In the reverse fixture in a couple of games this season, they've found ways to win or found ways to clinch a point later on. And for me, even if you don't go on to win the league, in the playoffs, that's going to say a lot. And I am starting to come around to the idea now that if York were in the playoffs, I would feel a little bit more confident about them being able to get the job done and go up through the playoffs than what I was a couple of weeks ago, because they do seem to be able to grind out results when it matters, like against Halifax. And that defeat midweek, it's only like the reverse fixture when Barnet lost to York. Everyone were negative about Barnet. So for me, overall, I wouldn't be too down if I was a York fan at the moment. Still overachieving this season compared to what everyone thought they'd do at the start of the season. But no, it's very much in Barnet's hands at the moment. But we know that can quickly change. Anything to finally add?
Just two things I want to say. Firstly, when you mention, York grinding out results, I feel like it's not really been highlighted as much this season because they do it in a very different way to other teams. You look at your Forest Greens and you look at your Oldhams, and they've ground out results in periods of the season. And I think that's mainly come from, it's come in kind of a scrappy manner at times, these set pieces late in the game. The difference between them and York is York do it in the manner in which they completely wear a team down. They are relentless. They will keep pushing and pushing and pushing until you cannot defend them anymore. And they do it in such a technical and attacking manner in which it is considerably more controlled, and that's kind of something that's very significant. And I think that's kind of, like you said, I think that might come into play massively if they are to have to go up through the playoffs. And just lastly, when we talk about the title race between Barnet and York, we talk about momentum in this league and how important it can be. Barnet are unbeaten in 19 games now. When you look at York, when you look at York's fixtures and results, the loss to Gainsborough, they lose to Sutton, pick up a win, lose to Boston, couple wins on the bounce, momentum's killed by the loss to Barnet. They can't seem to pick up that, that momentum that, can really, really get you flying. Whereas Barnet are absolutely flying because their momentum and their confidence is absolutely through the roof now. And I think that is quite a significant, attribute for Barnet to have going into the back end of the season. That obviously can be, killed by a loss. But, that when looking at it at face value at this stage in the season, I think that momentum that Barnet have in comparison to York maybe having, hit a bit of a roadblock and having to try and build up that momentum again, I think that could be a very significant factor in who comes out in the title winner this season.
100% agree, and I totally agree on your point about them wearing you down by keeping possession, because that's something they certainly did. They didn't just pump balls into the box for the sake of it. On the edge of the box, that final goal, if anyone saw the video, as soon as that cross went in, I knew that were going in. If someone was on the end of it, it is a little comical, I will say. That 30-minute clip from Halifax with the red card, and then going on to that, well, we all knew what was going to happen as soon as that cross was put in. But no, I won't be too down as a York fan. But no, Sam, I do really appreciate you coming on once again. Appreciate everyone that's tuned in tonight. And please remember to like and subscribe. Check out our sponsors, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.